Video games have been an important part to our society ever since they first came out in 1958. But more recently, people have been trying to make a connection between violent video games and violent actions. This is just not how I see it. Hi, my name is Patrick Lee, and today I want to talk to you today about why video games do not cause violent actions, why people think they do, and why they're wrong. If I were to ask you to think of a gamer, what do you think a gamer looks like? You're probably thinking of an overweight male who has a little grooming and a headset on. But if I was to ask that question to somebody else, they most likely would think of a teenager who is very aggressive and has violent tendencies. And I just don't think that's right. Because everybody games. Everybody has at one point in their lives. Whether it's something like Mario Kart or Candy Crush. Now, not all video games are violent, but for the people who do play violent video games, they do not have violent tendencies. The LA Times said that over 165 million Americans enjoy video games, and billions worldwide. The group also commented that yet other societies they do play video games more. They do not contend with the tragedy that we have to deal with every tragedy in the United States. Basically saying that while more people enjoy video games across the world, they do not have the same tragedies that we do in the United States. Now that we know why video games don't cause violent actions, we need to go back to why people think they do. This whole idea started back in the 90s when the first violent video games such as Doom and Wolfenstein first came out. During that time, politicians started to blame violent video games for different tragedies such as the Columbine shooting. Psychology.com says that there were various studies that took place from 2000 to 2014 over the violence of video games. But today I'm going to focus on a study done in 2000. What they did was they did a competitive reaction time test. What that is they took undergraduate students and they separated them into two groups. One group played a violent video game for 20 minutes, and another group played a non-violent video game for the same amount of time. Once they were finished, they each put individuals into different rooms and had them go against an opponent. And what they would do is the first person who would hit the button, whenever they saw light flash, they would win and get to punish the other opponent with loud noises, and they could push down the button as long as they wish. The two video games that were played were Wolfenstein 3D and Myth. But what they found out was that the people who played violent video games beforehand actually pushed down the button on average time longer than the non-violent. And this was a common conclusion across all the studies that were done within the time period. But they messed up. The experiment wasn't 100% correct. After looking back on it, I noticed that they were actually doing a different kind of study. They were trying to find the aggression levels and the violence after playing violent video games. But the difficulty of the video games was what stood out. Wolfenstein 3D was a video game that was based off a man going through different series of floors and levels of beating Nazi soldiers, and had increasingly hard levels and different weapons that they could choose from. Very difficult game. Myth was a game that had a player go around an island solving clues and puzzles, and it only had two controls. You could clearly see that the violent video game was actually a lot more difficult than the non-violent. So their aggression came from the fact that they had difficulty completing the game and mastering it. This was actually a common thing along all the studies done in that time period. Every single comparison between a violent and non-violent video game, the violent video game won out at being more difficult. Also, going back to that study, the average time of how long each party held down the punish button, the violent video game only held it down for a tenth of a second longer, making it about the same time. Now, I talked a lot today about video games and how we've had a bad image with it, and I just think we need to change that. Considering that what is going on today, this is especially what we need right now is video games. Something to step out of the natural reality and step into something that we don't have to think about of the bad things that are happening. In conclusion, I talked to you about how violent video games do not cause violent actions, why people think they do, and why they're wrong. Thank you.